let hard times make you. Learn the F word, because as you follow the 5 rules of failure and move forward into success, you'll find that after it sucks, failure rules.
For some heroes! Hey, what's up, everybody? It's the Coxinator, and I'm here with a very special guest who's an old friend of mine, a huge inspiration, and hopefully through this interview he'll become an inspiration to you as well. He's got a brand new book coming out. He's a hardcore punk rock pioneer in my book. Ladies and gentlemen, make welcome Andrew Thorp King. What's up, buddy?
My man, the Coxinator. I love it. Great moniker, pal. Good to see you. It's been so long, dude. So long. So good to see you.
It has been a long time. I mean, I went back into the archives, and I don't know if you see that or not. Folks, that's our album that we made back in the day, released on Thorp Records. And me and Thorp go way back. We met each other, 1996?
Late 90s, 98, 99?
Was it?
98, 99, yeah. Something like that, yeah.
We met at Rex's Bar in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And yep. I see this huge, muscled out dude wearing a Gorilla Biscuits t-shirt. And I had to start talking to you. You've written this book based on failures, and of course, in reading some of it, I haven't been able to read the whole thing, but
sure.
I have seen that a lot of the failure that you talk about kind of started to give birth around that time when we met, as you were struggling to find your purpose and everything. What was life like for you growing up to the time that we met?
Okay. Well, I'll just start with the time we met, and then I can go back a little bit.
Let's do it.
The time we met, you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the themes of like that early adulthood period, when I was out of college, the world was wide open, wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life, trying to figure out what it meant to have a quote-unquote calling, and wrapping my arms around the common perception of a calling being a singular kind of pursuit, right? Like you are born for this, and not really seeing it that way, right? But still trying to find what was my next step in my calling journey. So in the book, I talk about a calling journey, which is more of a tapestry of pursuits that ultimately, if you're aligned with your internal spirit voice, will align you with what would be your North Star pursuit, or something that would represent your highest usefulness in the world and highest meaning to you, both in a practical worldly sense and in a spiritual sense, right? So at that time in my life, I was grappling with all that. I graduated with an English degree after dropping out of student teaching because I decided I didn't want to be a teacher. That did not seem to really be compatible with who I was in many ways. I wanted to do something a little more creative, a little more with a little more adventure, a little more, kind of getting out in the world. Ended up working at a steel plant. That was seemingly to most people would be a very boring, grueling, rote job. But to me, for the time I was there, it was a real growth period, just being amongst the working poor, having to learn Spanglish better, and just getting a real flavor of real life for people that were taking care of their families, and hard work, of course. It was during that time that I decided I needed a new challenge. I wasn't in school anymore. Steel plant was interesting, but it wasn't like a mental challenge or like a pursuit challenge. So sure. That's when I decided to do a bodybuilding show, because I always wanted to do one. Didn't really want to be a bodybuilder long term, but wanted to do at least one show. So I got a trainer, got my diet in flight, and went hardcore, and ended up doing one bodybuilding show. It was fun. I mean, I got like 6th place out of 12 guys, but it was a great day. Got my picture in Muscle Fitness, that kind of thing. But it was like during that period, I was also writing poetry and journal entries and doing like these small little spoken word events. And it was like I was teasing out like, my creative impulses, and figuring out my way in the world, and broke as fuck, excuse my language, and it was just like one of those, period. Like, what am I going to do with my life? Where am I going? But at each decision point, it was like, how can I align and marry money, practical, necessary, with meaning, even more necessary for flourishment and fulfillment in life, right? So it's almost like marrying. How do I marry worldly nimbleness with with spiritual integrity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like that was the struggle I was going through, and that's kind of been a theme throughout my whole life. It's a theme throughout the book, and it's kind of how I talk about the idea of being in touch with the internal spirit voice, which many people recognize as being divine or from God, and how do you know what that is, interpret that, and apply that in the world so that you're actually aligned with your calling journey, not missing it, and are doing your best to actualize your highest meaning in the world.
Sure.
Your unique talent stack, God given. So,
Thorp, you've always been a wordsmith, and in that, you said you graduated with an English major degree. Amazing stuff. That's one thing that I found fascinating about you when I first met you during that time that you just spoke of, because we had just put Jay, my brother, moved him from lead singer to drums for the purpose of tightening up the music, and we were in search of a lead singer. So I see you at the bar at Rex's in the midst of all this inner struggle that you're going through in life, as we were too, angry, pissed off at the world, wanting to express that outlet through hardcore punk music. And by providence, I met you at Rex's, and we began to talk. And I remember in my mind's eye saying, "Have you ever been in a band? Can you sing?" And you're like, yeah, I can sing. And then we had you come over, and I'll never forget our first practice, because you got to our house, because we had band practice at my house, and you came in with a pen and a notebook, and we started playing our songs for you. That we had come up with, because we wrote original stuff, because we wanted to be the hardest, baddest band coming out of Southeast Pennsylvania there was. Playing old school hardcore. And you came in, and I think in that first practice, we must have gotten through like three or five songs, complete, with your vocals, and it was like this. I'm sitting there watching you, and now at this time, folks, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a believer in any type of deity or anything. If I was, it was God hates us all, and makes us suffer and die. This is about 10 hours after the interview with Thorp. I'm sitting here in my house. It's about 89 degrees right now, because just this morning, as soon as the interview was over, our AC died. The one that we paid about $8,000 for 2 years ago, so that this kind of thing wouldn't happen. So, yeah. Jesus and God was not high on my priority list. And I'm sitting here watching this guy just seem to come up with these lyrics that fit just perfectly with the sound we were going for. And I noticed your Jesus tattoo on your right shoulder, I believe it was.
Yeah. Jesus, right there. Yep. That's
the one I saw, folks. And I remember specifically asking you, what's up with the Jesus tattoo? And you're like, yeah, I believe in God and everything. Now, that's one thing in reading your book, and it's failure rules, folks. The 5 rules for failure for entrepreneurs, creatives, and authentics. One of the things in terms, and you've even mentioned it already, there you go, buddy, is the term internal spirit voice. What does that mean for people who might not know what you're saying there?
Right. So, given I have my own faith, path. I'm a believer in Christ. Frankly, I don't go to church for whatever anybody thinks about that. Whatever.
We'll get to that.
Internal spirit voice. I kind of, this is for a general audience, so it's trying to describe what to me I recognize as the voice of God, or Christians would call the Holy Spirit. It's just that rhythm, that pulse, that communication, which is often ethereal, not clear. It's not like there's some Morse code sent down to us where we actually know exactly what the Spirit wants us to do or think or say, or how to process the complexity of life, right? So it's kind of just, to me, it's saying, all right, look, whether you are a person of faith, believe in God, or a Christian, or follow some other faith expression, I think all of us, from a human perspective, we know what we mean when we say your inner voice. We know what we mean when we say that voice inside, like whether it's our conscience, whether it's just an intuition. all these intangible kind of things that really are mechanisms of what one would call the spirit world, like that is real. And so to me, it's like trying to touch on that and get people to think about when you're in the midst of a decision and you filter through all the information and you crowded out everybody else's voice and you have this gut instinct that we call. What is that? Where does that come from? How do you grapple with, or make decisions based on that? And so I'm trying to get people to think of that. And like, for me, I really do think that voice is in all of us and is placed there by God, whether we know him or not. And that there is something that is provoking us from the spirit world, from the divine, that we ought to pay attention to. Mm-hmm. And it's not clear all the time, but there. And for me, it has caused me to not drift from what I believe is my calling journey, making decisions along the way in an iterative fashion where I'm trying to interpret what to do next, sometimes in very tricky, complex, messy situations, so that I can find a way to, at every touch point, do my best to fully align with utilizing my unique skills, creativity, personality, all God-given, and how to maximize that for highest output and meaning in the world and my highest usefulness. And to me, that is part of why we're here, to figure that out. And I don't know how you do that without trying to interact with divinity.
How did you grow to recognize that voice and come to a point where you allowed that voice to lead you through life?
That's a good question. So I would say when I was 16 or so, I had not had a relationship with God at that point, but was very well versed in at least, from a on paper standpoint, what that was supposed to mean, but didn't really understand it from an actual relationship, spiritual standpoint in terms of actually knowing God or knowing how to communicate with God, right? And I was, a punk rocker. I was angry. Back then, it was very different. I mean, today, like, having tattoos is not controversial. It's no big deal. Having whatever, a quote unquote punk look, style, everything is just accepted, cool, hip. Like, there's really nothing rebellious about it.
Right.
Back then, it was different. In the 80s, I mean, it was like, if you had a skateboard under your feet and punk rock on the turntable, you got your ass beat. You didn't get a date to the prom. Like, you got your ass beat by jocks or whatever, right? And
sure.
Nothing against sports at all, right? But back then, it was like, I'd walk down the street with a skateboard and like 10 jocks would surround me and just beat the shit out of me. Like, that stuff happened all the time. And especially when my best friend was Arab and they would make fun of him because his name and, all kinds of things like that. So it was like being different. And that whole thing made me very, very angry. I think I was probably 15 or 16. I started going to the gym and working out, and I started getting big, and revenge was on my mind, right? So, I'm listening to Slayer, Danzig metal, hardcore, all this stuff, and like there was just anger pulsing through me, and I invoked revenge. I got in a lot of fights, threw a guy through a Domino's Pizza window. It was just that was all in me, and it was not healthy. None of that was healthy, obviously, right?
I don't like Domino's
so
either.
To me, yeah, Domino's sucks. But and I just remember like knowing that there was this, we talk about integrity, the word integrity, and disintegration is, not having integrity within yourself. And I felt disintegrated, right? I knew that I was drifting from something whole, from something pure, from something healthy, from something that would actually bring me into who I was meant to be. And it was like this, I felt that voice and this conscience, this knowing that this was the wrong direction. And at the time I was searching, right, I was looking for truth. I was John Joseph of the Cro-Mags, who wrote the foreword to Failure Rules. Be a seeker of the truth. I was a seeker of the truth, wherever that might lead me. Henry Rollins' book, Pissing in the Gene Pool. And so back then, to try to get literature like that, like alt punk, type literature, I mean, didn't really exist that often, and Rollins was the forefront of that, who I still love and respect that guy today. Just saw him the other night and met him and gave him a book. But his book, Pissing in the Gene Pool, I think was a great book. It was steeped in nihilism, steeped in kind of observational chaos. And that book gave me a window into a world that I believed was an accurate representation of certain, parts of this world, and it just made me realize the depth of dysfunction, imperfection, and kind of the remnants of what we call sin in the world. Which sin is the Greek word for sin is hamartia, to miss the mark, right? Which has all kinds of gradations on how one might miss the mark, from pure evil to just simply being a human who's imperfect. There's a whole spectrum there. And I just remember like feeling that book and being like, is this all there is? Because this is real. And why would this exist? Why would a world even exist where this happens? And so grappling with the idea of dysfunction and imperfect, this broken world and sin and all that, and then being like, all right, I'm a seeker of the truth. I don't just want the problem. I want an answer. I want something that's going to complete the circle here.
I can't believe you're not afraid.
And, around that time, I got my first tattoo. And, I was 16 and tattoos weren't ever accepted back then. And my parents were not happy. So whatever, I was like grounded for the weekend. And I remember just being in my room, like, thinking, all right, what is going on in this world? I remember having stomach pains, having anxiety about like existential anxiety. Like, why the fuck am I here? What is going on? What is my purpose? It can't be to continue to live with this anger boiling in me. It can't be to continue to seek physical revenge on those who I believe, bully me or whatever. And it can't be to view the world through the lens, even if accurate, that I read in Henry Rollins' book. There's got to be something more.
That's right.
And not something fantastical or fake or manufactured, but something real and deep. And that's got to come outside of me. And it was pretty much at that moment where I, began my relationship with God and decided to, acknowledge his power and existence and my need for him in my life.
Exactly. No.